Hello and welcome to Safe Pasture. My name is Sherry Hammers and we are continuing on in the book by Andrew Murray called The Holiest of All. Today we will be starting on chapter 58 called The Priest King on the Throne in the Heavens. But Andrew has actually split this book into several sections of things he really wanted to key in on. And so now we're entering into the sixth section. And he calls this section the New Sanctuary and the New Covenant. He starts off with Hebrews 8:1. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the Majesty in the heavens. He starts off, the priest, the representative of the religious life. The king, the guide of the civil life of the people. The priest represents purity. The king, power. It is the glory of the new dispensation. And like I said in a previous episode, he's not talking about dispensationalism. He's talking about how God deals with people in the Old Testament and how God deals with people in the New. He said, it is the glory of the new dispensation that the priest is king. The cleansing from sin and the access to God which that gives is all in a power that goes through the whole life. Religion is no longer to be a thing of times and seasons, of special acts or emotions. In kingly power, our high priest rules over all. So he's saying here, these two offices have come together, the priest and the king, for the first time. All right, and that because he is a king sat down on the right hand of the throne of the Majesty in the heavens. The Son of God became man, that he might win for himself and us, for humanity, his own and ours, the power he had with the Father before the world began. So he's restoring this situation, this relationship. Jesus is passed through the heavens, made higher than the heavens, seated on the throne in the heavens, in order that he might open the kingdom of heaven to us. Heaven, we have said before, is not only a place, but a state of life. The kingdom of heaven can come to us here on earth in power and be set up within our hearts. Remember when Jesus was walking the earth, he would say that the kingdom of heaven is near you. That's because at that point, before he died, the kingdom of heaven had not come down in power. It could not be set up within our hearts yet, because Jesus had not taken down the veil of separation in the temple and in the temple in heaven to the Holy of Holies. It says, the will of God can be done on earth as in heaven. All Jesus is heavenly. So everything connected with Jesus is heavenly. All the gifts he bestows, all the work he does, all the life he breathes, all the power he exercises is exclusively heavenly. This is the solid food for the perfect. As our faith receives and feeds upon this, it becomes partaker of the very Spirit of heaven in the power of an endless life. And I put here a note, when Jesus, when he passed through the heavens, I think that's what we just said here. Yeah, he passed through the heavens, right? And I put a note here because when I first read this, I wrote it down in the book. Think about this. Think about the power of Jesus. When he passed through the heavens, he passed through where some of the fallen powers, that heavenly realm where the evil spirits and the fallen powers, like he passed past them. And they had to be terrified because even when Jesus was walking the earth before he died, you remember there were encounters Jesus would have with evil spirits. And like one time, the first thing they said to him was, you're not going to send us to the abyss before our appointed time, are you? They were terrified of him. Can you imagine the terror after they thought that they had won? He was on the cross. He was dead. He was in the tomb. He was dead. And I'm sure there were all kinds of parties throughout the demonic realm that they were like, we got just what we were hoping for. We had to work on it for some centuries to get this accomplished, but we got this thing. This has been prophesied since Adam and Eve, and now we have finally won. And then Jesus not only raises from the dead, but he ascends into heaven, and he goes through all the heavens. You know, there's first heaven where we're at, the second heaven where the atmosphere, the evil spirits are together with us in this world, and then there's the heaven where God reigns, where his habitation is, and you know, and then it says he sat down on the throne of the Majesty in the heavens. Can you imagine the shockwaves that went through the evil side of the evil realm when they realized, I mean, it had to completely terrify them. And honestly, I don't believe they've gotten over it. Now there's, you read in the book of Revelation, they will incite some people, and most of the people in the world, when it comes down to it, that they can actually overcome God. But that's just one last-ditch effort to get some glory for themselves. Anyway, I'll get back to this. It says, we know how to the first disciples this blessed truth was revealed and sealed. It was by the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven. He says the Spirit of heaven is the Spirit in the power of which the angels do God's will there. And I kind of reworded it so I could understand it in my own head better. But the Holy Spirit is the power by which the angels do their work. So whenever an angel is sent out to do battle or to do something, to comfort, to encourage, whatever that angel is sent to do, they are powered by the power of the Holy Spirit. He says, the Spirit of heaven is the Spirit which came down from the opened heaven on the Son of Man. The Spirit of heaven was sent down to his disciples by the Son of Man when he had sat down at the right hand of the Father of the throne in the heavens, as their share in his exaltation, not as the Spirit of conversion, but as the Spirit to seal their faith. That's interesting. So they weren't converted. This is what Andrew's saying here. They weren't converted. They were sealed that day. Hopefully they were converted before then. They obviously they believed that Jesus was God. They had received his words. They were trying to obey him. But he says the Spirit came to seal their faith as their experience of fellowship with him in his glory, as their participation in the joy and holiness of the heavenly life, as their power to conquer sin and the world. To those who are willing to come and be separate and utterly forsake this world, this Spirit of heaven still comes as the gift of our heavenly high priest. I want to go over those things again. I know I read through them kind of quickly. But so the Spirit came to seal their faith. He came as their experience of fellowship with him in his glory. So we fellowship with Jesus in his glory by the power of the Holy Spirit, as their participation in the joy and holiness of the heavenly life. So it's by the Spirit that we can live in this fallen, decadent, just crazy world, but we can have that peace that passes understanding, and we can have joy that's not dependent on our circumstances, which is what happiness is. So we can have the joy and the holiness of the heavenly life right here in this messed up, fallen, sinful world. We can have joy and holiness. That's a miracle. The Holy Spirit came as their power to conquer sin and the world. So when people talk about, because I've heard people say this, and I'm not coming down on them because I've heard it all the time. I was at church, and people I would listen to from the organized church, even on the internet. But I believe this is true according to the Word, that we don't. I've heard people. Okay, let me just clarify. I've heard people say over and over again that, you can't even get through a single day without sinning. Well, I don't know where you find that in the Bible. And I'm not saying that I live perfectly. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that we have a hope in the Holy Spirit, in the power of the Holy Spirit, to conquer sin and the world. Jesus came and he annihilated the power of sin in our lives. When we accept his finished work on the cross, he's pulled us out of the bondage of sin, and he's conquered it for us. Now, we still have a flesh. We give into the flesh, and we give into temptation to satisfy that flesh. I understand we all do this. We all do. I'm saying, though, that the Holy Spirit is our way out of that. We don't have to sin every day. We don't have to sin in all these different ways. It's as we give into the flesh is when we sin. And Jesus has given us power over the flesh. We just have to avail ourselves of that and be mindful of who he is. That's what we were talking about in a previous episode, that we need to stay in that Holy of Holies. We need to abide there. Do you honestly think, let's just say, hypothetically, that you spend an entire 24 hours, or all your waking hours, we'll just put it that way. You spent it in the Holy of Holies, in fellowship with God. You know that you did. Do you think you'd be sinning there in the Holy of Holies? No. When you're in the Holy of Holies, you're not in the flesh. So I'm saying this to myself as well. But there is power to not sin. And if God can't do that, then why are we saying he's the God of the impossible? Jesus said, remember what Jesus said? With men, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Was he talking about it's possible not to sin in a whole 24-hour period? He said all things. And so I'm just saying that is the hope. That's what we need to be striving and growing toward in the Spirit. All right, to finish up, he says, to those who are willing to come and be separate and utterly forsake this world, this Spirit of heaven still comes as a gift of our heavenly high priest. So when we utterly forsake this world, we utterly forsake our flesh as well. All right, so I'm going to go on just a little bit. He's got a little bit here. Such a priest became us. So this high priest we have, he was one of us. He's lived this life. He says, but that we have, yes, not only in thought and gift, but in living enjoyment, we have such a high priest who sat down on the right hand of the throne of the Majesty in the heavens. He sat down on the right hand of the throne of the Majesty in the heavens. Ever connect Christ's entering the heavenly life and his ascending the throne with the descent of the Spirit to be the life of the disciples. So he's saying, as Jesus went up and ascended to the throne, think of those connected. He ascended to the throne. He sent down the Holy Spirit to help us. And one little thing that I wrote in here, because I think it sparked it, because it says he gives the Holy Spirit in living enjoyment. I ran across a quote of Augustine, or Augustine, how some people pronounce it, but he said, man's happiness is God himself. So people that are searching for happiness, and I think maybe I would improve on that by saying man's joy. But people talk about happiness in this world. And maybe happiness is a better word, because happiness is about the feeling you get when your circumstances are favorable around you. That's when you're happy. And so if the circumstances change, then you're not happy. And people talk about their happiness all the time. I mean, it's even in our Constitution, that we're the pursuit of happiness, that we have that right. Well, Augustine said that man's happiness is God himself. Well, how could that be? God would have to be what's surrounding us. And that ties right into us talking about abiding in God. So I just thought it was appropriate that man's happiness is God himself. When we are totally immersed in God, we can't help but be happy. Well, I hope this has inspired you and encouraged you. Please subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you next time. God bless.